Clara stepped off the train with trembling hands that clutched the handle of her small, worn suitcase, her heart pounding against her ribs as if it wanted to leap out and run away before she could face what was coming. The long journey had left her weary, but inside she carried a fragile flame of hope that refused to die. At 42, she knew she wasn't what many men expected when they placed ads for mail-order brides, yet she had written her letters with honesty and kindness, pouring pieces of her soul into every word. The man she had come to meet, Mr. Grayson, had responded with promises of a fresh start, of companionship, of a home where she would finally belong. She told herself over and over that he would see the real her, that her years were not a burden but a testament to her strength. She stood on the station platform, her eyes searching the crowd until they landed on a tall man in a fine coat, holding a folded letter she recognized as her own. For a moment, relief washed over her, and she lifted a tentative smile. But as his gaze settled on her, that relief twisted into dread. His brow furrowed, his mouth tightened, and a shadow of disappointment darkened his face. He stepped closer, looking her over as though she were a package that had arrived damaged. Clara straightened her back, willing herself not to shrink under his scrutiny, but his words cut through her composure with brutal finality. "You're older than I expected," he muttered, his voice thick with disapproval. "Too old. I wanted someone younger, someone who could give me children." Clara's lips parted in shock, her voice caught in her throat, unable to form a reply before he turned away. His boots kicked up the dust as he strode off, leaving her stranded in the middle of a bustling station where strangers now watched her with curiosity and pity. The dream she had carried across miles crumbled in that instant, leaving her standing alone with her suitcase and the sting of humiliation burning her cheeks. The crowd thinned, the train whistle faded into the distance, and Clara felt the heavy silence of rejection settle around her like a shroud, her fingers tightening on the handle of the only possession she had left. She spent the first night in a modest room at the small inn near the edge of town, the thin walls doing little to quiet the laughter and chatter drifting up from the tavern below. Clara sat on the narrow bed, staring at her suitcase, which now seemed almost mocking in its smallness. It held everything she owned, all that she had sacrificed in order to reach this place, and now it sat at the foot of a bed that did not belong to her, in a town where she had no place to call home. The words of Mr. Grayson echoed in her mind with cruel persistence, each syllable twisting deeper into her chest until she felt as though her very heart was bruised. She had imagined arriving to a warm welcome, to a man who valued her honesty, who might overlook the years written on her face. But instead she was met with the stain that spread quickly into gossip. When she went downstairs to fetch water, she heard the whispers from a pair of women cleaning the floorboards, their voices low but sharp, mocking the old bride who had come chasing a fantasy only to be tossed aside like an unwanted garment. Clara held her chin high as she passed, but her cheeks burned hot, her pride trembling beneath the weight of humiliation. The following day she wandered through the town, her steps slow and heavy as she tried to absorb the reality of her situation. The sun poured down bright and relentless, illuminating the wide prairie beyond the buildings, its vastness reminding her of how small and lost she felt. She thought of turning back, of finding a way to return home, but the truth pressed against her. There was nothing left to go back to. She had sold most of her belongings to pay for the ticket, and the few friends she had in her old town had already moved on with their lives. The thought of starting over again at her age nearly suffocated her. That evening, she sat outside the inn on a wooden bench, watching the horizon bleed orange and pink as the sun sank low. The air was crisp, carrying with it the faint scent of hay and earth, and Clara clasped her hands tightly in her lap. In the quiet of that moment, she whispered a prayer, not for a husband anymore, but for a simple kindness, a chance to belong, and for someone, somewhere, to see her as more than the number of years she carried. The morning sun filtered through the dusty window of the inn, its light brushing gently across Clara's face as she sat with a cup of weak coffee cooling in her hands. Her thoughts drifted aimlessly, heavy with the ache of rejection, when the creak of boots on the wooden floor pulled her back to the present. A man with kind eyes, framed by lines that told of both hard work and quiet laughter, paused near her table. He wore no fine coat or polished shoes, just a plain shirt rolled at the sleeves and trousers dusted from the fields, yet something in his manner held a quiet dignity. He tipped his hat and asked softly if the seat beside her was taken. Clara hesitated, surprised by the attention, then nodded. His name was Thomas, and as he sat, his voice carried a warmth that melted through the cold shell she had wrapped around herself. He did not start with questions about her age or her usefulness, nor did he pry into why she was sitting alone at the inn. Instead, he spoke of simple things: how the morning sky looked painted with fire, how the earth smelled after last night's rain, how his daughter laughed when she chased the chickens around their small homestead. His words were unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world to share them with her, and in the pauses, he looked at her as though waiting to hear her own stories. Tentatively, Clara found herself speaking, telling him of the books she loved, the gardens she once tended, the quiet joys she had carried through the years. To her surprise, he listened with genuine interest, leaning in as though her words mattered deeply to him. Unlike the man who had so quickly dismissed her, Thomas's gaze did not measure her against some impossible expectation. His eyes reflected an appreciation for the resilience etched into her every line, the patience that life had carved into her, the strength she carried even in silence. When he laughed, it was soft and unforced, and it drew an answering smile from Clara, one she had thought she had forgotten how to give. The sting of rejection did not vanish entirely, but sitting there beside him, it loosened its grip, and for the first time since stepping off the train, Clara felt a flicker of hope that perhaps her story was not finished after all, that perhaps she was being seen not as too old, but simply as herself. As the days turned into weeks, Clara found herself drawn more often into Thomas's company, each meeting unfolding with an ease that surprised her. He invited her to see his homestead, a modest stretch of land that bore the marks of his labor. The house was small, the wood weathered by years of wind and sun, but it felt alive with warmth. His daughter, Anna, ran out to greet them, her braids bouncing, her laughter ringing through the air as she took Clara's hand without hesitation, as though she had always belonged there. Clara walked through the fields beside Thomas, listening as he spoke of the seasons, of planting and harvest, of nights spent staring at the stars after a day's hard work. He did not promise riches or grandeur, but there was a steadiness in his words, a truth that wrapped around her like a blanket against the chill of doubt. The quiet companionship they shared deepened into something neither of them had expected. Clara found herself laughing more, her heart softening as Anna tugged her into games or sat curled in her lap with the storybook. The loneliness that had weighed on her for so long began to lift, replaced by a sense of belonging that grew stronger with each passing day. She began to notice how Thomas looked at her when she thought no one was watching. His eyes held no judgment, only respect, admiration, and something tender that stirred emotions she had buried long ago. When she helped him with chores, he worked beside her without condescension, and when he spoke of the future, he spoke as if she was already a part of it. One evening, the sky stretched wide in brilliant shades of orange and gold, the air crisp with the scent of autumn. They stood together near the edge of the field, Anna chasing fireflies nearby, her laughter carried by the wind. Thomas turned to Clara, his expression serious yet gentle, and took her hand in his rough, calloused one. His voice was low but steady as he said he wasn't searching for someone younger or for the shallow promises others might demand. What he wanted was realness, companionship, someone who could walk beside him through the hardships and joys alike. He told her plainly, with a sincerity that left no room for doubt, that he wanted her. Clara's eyes filled with tears, not from sorrow but from a deep and overwhelming grace, and in that moment she understood that love had finally found her, not bound to age or expectation, but rooted in the truth of two hearts that had finally recognized one another.